Hello and heartily welcome here at the Deep Dive stage. We are going to dedicate the upcoming 45 minutes to the topics of supply chain, circularity and net zero industries. My name is Mia Heresch and I'm very happy to be here on stage and of course to share this stage with these amazing speakers, because we have really a high-class speakers lineup. And as our time is limited, we will dive in directly into the presentation of the speakers. And of course, afterwards, after our conversation, or let's say at the last minutes, you will also have time to address your questions. And was also very important to mention that all of our speakers here, we are very aware of also social justice, even though this is not one of the main topics. The companies and the speakers, they all care about it a lot. But now I will tell you who we have here on stage, because it's my very, very pleasure to have Johanna Klewitz here with us. She is Head of Supply Chain Sustainability at AUDI.
Thank you for having me.
And then the girls here on the left-hand side. This is Daniela Lindner. She is Head of Applied Hydrogen Technologies at the German Center of Aerospace. And then coming to the male part of this stage. This was not planned. Yeah, this is Constantin Schwaab. He is the founder and CEO of Wirelane. And Wirelane is one of the leading e-mobility providing platforms that we have in Europe. And then we have Marco Lescher. He is Director of Customer Care and Service at Nespresso Germany. And then, last but not least, this is Fabian Heidinger. He is Head of Sustainability at MAN Trucks and Bus. Yeah. So we have our three topics of circularity, net zero industries, and supply chain. And we're going to dive into this now. I want to start with you, Johanna, because the Volkswagen Group, with its passenger vehicles, is responsible for 1% of the man-made CO2 emissions worldwide, but was also one of the first big companies to agree to commit to the Paris Climate Agreement. And you at Audi, you have a decarbonization program that I'm very excited to know more about. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, I'll be happy to do that. And actually, there are colleagues here who developed this decarbonization program for Audi. And I think what is really important that we, because I'm from procurement, so a very specific supply chain perspective, that we have measurable goals within the company so that we as business areas know what to work on, what are the key areas that we need to focus on. And that's why we have this decarbonization index, which tells us as procurement which materials like aluminum and steel, but also the battery, it's not so surprising, of course, we have to work on, and what are also tangible targets that we can set towards the suppliers to still have a competitive portfolio, but at the same time have ambitious enough goals to actually reduce.
All right. Fabian, you also have ambitious goals to reduce your CO2 footprint. Can you also tell us something about the goals that MAN has set themselves?
Yeah, happy to. So we are actually on the way to net zero, but it's not going to be a sprint. We have a huge CO2 footprint. It's around 133 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions. And these are largely caused by the use phase of the vehicles we sell. So I can tell you that 98% roughly of our CO2 footprint comes from the vehicles that we sell. The good news is that we think there is a very straight out solution to that. And we are focusing very much on bringing battery electric trucks and buses into the markets. And why is that? We estimate that already with today's electricity grid mix in Europe, a battery electric long-haul truck would save around 43% of greenhouse gas emissions over the life cycle. But if you would use wind energy, the very same truck could save up to 93% of greenhouse gas emissions. And so you get the trick. This will be our main lever to actually come close to becoming net zero. I always say this is for the foreseeable future because we are in a major transition. We are the inventor of the diesel engine, so you can imagine this is not so easy for us to move from diesel to electric. But we're obviously also looking into hydrogen, also interested to talk with Daniela about this. But for the foreseeable future, we don't see this as a solution right now.
Okay, now that you already mentioned Daniela, where are the main application fields of hydrogen right now in the economy?
I think it's mainly for example, the heavy mobility, perhaps not as you mentioned in the near term, but of course it will be in the future one aspect for trucks, for example, but especially in the aircraft industry. The complete flight sector has to be decarbonized, and this is not possible with battery electric planes. So this is one of the very, very big and challenging fields to get hydrogen into the planes. Then, of course, the heavy industry itself, steel and cement industry as one big example. They have the need for hydrogen as a energy carrier to decarbonize. There is no other solution up to now. And of course, as well, the chemical industry has always had the need for hydrogen as one basic element to produce products, for example, for the pharmaceutical industry, also for the agricultural industry, for example. So
oh, wow.
These three fields.
Field of application is wide. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, as you see, we are like jumping a little bit from one to the other topic, but as our round is as diverse, I think that absolutely makes sense. And now I want to talk about coffee, because coffee can also be a force of good, as I learned from Nespresso. How is that possible?
Yeah, I think that's what we saw yesterday in the speeches in the awards, for example, that there's a dramatic need for really climate action, and as well for coffee, biodiversity decline is a topic, and that impacts as well the coffee farms heavily. And that requests, especially Nespresso, being a leader in the coffee industry, and for 1 year now being a B Corp, so a benefit corporation, trying to balance really profits with purpose and social impact, to act and to accelerate more, especially when it comes to our coffee farms. And maybe to make it a bit, and people may wonder, what is this? This is honey. Honey from Colombia, and this is something which was a little bit by chance because a colleague was there last week. And basically, we put beehives on the farms in Colombia, and they, in the end, increased the yield which can be harvested from the coffee trees. So that the bees help in pollination, increasing the pollination, and so a coffee tree or the harvest of the coffee tree can be increased. And this is our topic here as well at the GreenTech Festival, is only possible with collaborations. And this was done, for example, with a startup UBees, which have a digital solutions where you can really track the bees, how they're flying, and as well from how many trees, different species, not only coffee trees, but as well fruit trees, these are on the farm. So that is something which drives into biodiversity. And I think that all comes to regenerative agriculture, where we try to transform our the work we do with all over 140,000 farms together to drive this really in the direction of regenerative agriculture.
Thank you, Marco. And now coming from regenerative agriculture to regenerative energies. This is what you deal with at Wirelane. What are like the biggest challenges right now? Also maybe concerning the partnerships and also the acceptance within the industry.
So the challenges are obviously, as for any startup, a moving target, right? So when we started about 7 years ago, I think simply no one understood why they would need charging infrastructure for electric vehicles because there were no electric vehicles. So then later on, it turned into more of an issue on the regulatory side. How do you develop the right product? So in our case, you have to understand we produce charge points and they need to be gauged under German law, they need to be certified, and it's a very cumbersome process. You need to go through this process and you need to basically create an industrializable product. So this was something where we did struggle a bit with, but nowadays I would say one of the biggest hurdles is definitely getting everything installed and financed. So getting the financial industry, the stakeholders on the financial side onboarded to actually sponsor the infrastructure so we can offboard the assets, as you say, from a balance sheet perspective. And that is one of the most important things, I think, also in the context of this event, this conference, is that no matter what we do in the end, we need to create bankable solutions. Without bankability, without the financial industry and also large industrial players, we won't need to move the needle. So that's super important for all of us.
All right. A very important big player is Audi. And talking about supply chain, you are working, collaborating with 14,000 different companies within your supply chain, and you've set yourself the goal to have a positive impact within your own supply chain. How is that possible to convince every one of those 14,000 suppliers to be committed to that aim?
As you already mentioned, it sounds complex and a lot of work, and it's true. So from an Audi perspective, you have to imagine our direct suppliers. That's about 14,000 direct suppliers, but that's of course not the end of the supply chain. Behind that, we'll have many sub-suppliers depending on the supply chain that we're speaking about. And what I've learned in the past 6 years working within Audi, really from the procurement perspective, you have to really do it in 3, let's say, stages. First of all, of course, you have a clear strategy, people, environment, and innovation. In our case, that's not so surprising in the sustainability context. But then what becomes important that you have goals or you have tools like the decarbonization index where you can set measurable goals towards the suppliers so you have clear requirements within the sourcing process. Commit to certain goals. And the same is true, for example, for our sustainability rating, which we already introduced in 2019. So in our code of conduct for business partners, we say very clearly what we expect of our direct suppliers and also how it has to be passed down to the supply chains. And then it's also about capacity building, right? So collaboration was a big theme also yesterday, that we have to start sort of telling more a positive narrative and not just look at the problems, but maybe also think more on the solutions and motivate each other in a different way. I think that's really becoming a very important aspect of the sustainability story. And here we have a program where we really simply explain to suppliers what we mean, what are the requirements, why do we do it, and what is expected, and what are also possible solutions to get there. So it's really these 3 kinds of measures that we use to then start handling the complexity of those 14,000 suppliers.
Wow, okay. And compared to Audi, Wirelane is like a smaller client, but you also care of sustainability within your supply chain. How do you manage that, and where are your challenges within that?
So fortunately, we don't have 14,000 suppliers. That would be overwhelming for our organization. But we have been working for large corporates. So I also know the other side of the table. We actually installed and delivered charge points to BMW Group across the globe. So we installed charge points at all BMW dealerships. We've been working with Volkswagen. So one of the first product was a digital product for Volkswagen Group, where the users could actually use charge points in the public space. and that was based on our software code. So we made the experience that being listed at a large corporate is quite a demanding process. So from the startup perspective or a small entity's perspective, it is by far not as easy to actually create, first of all, a framework under which the suppliers can be listed, and then also to track whatever your suppliers do. And then there comes another thing that kicks in, is that you simply don't have the lever, the negotiation power on your side. So when you talk to suppliers, there's sometimes what I call an asymmetry. It's definitely, it's an inverse effect. So you talk to a supplier, and the supplier is much bigger than you. And they have many, many other clients, often automotive, by the way, especially when it comes to hardware manufacturing. So the suppliers we work with, they have to be tier 1 automotive suppliers, or else we wouldn't get our product certified. But then we're a very small client within their list of clients. You can imagine that their will to actually change processes to satisfy our needs, also in terms of sustainability, is extremely challenging. I'm not saying that this is an argument for us to not do anything, quite the contrary. So we do a lot on our company level to reduce emissions, but when it comes to the scopes, the so-called scopes, in achieving the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, it's simply a very challenging task for a smaller company.
But what's like the experience so far? Do you see that the suppliers, that they are willing also to contribute to the SDGs, or is it like not so combinable so far?
So I think that depends a lot on the industry. I mean, if you look at a supplier like a coffee company, I mean, obviously they do something about that. I think they're much closer to the topic also because they're a consumer-facing company. When it comes to industrial suppliers, I think it has not yet hit them as hard as it should, but that's also a bit the responsibility of their larger clients. And as you said, Johanna, you guys are working on it. So I think while we should do whatever we can in our power to increase the pressure on suppliers across the value chain, realistically speaking, it's not going to happen without the support of the larger entities. So the suppliers I can speak of, the problem is the following. Last year was a very specific situation for supply chain, right? So you had the war in Ukraine and you had global increase in raw material prices. This is something I simply cannot control. So just as your products, Johanna, our products are made of aluminum. Aluminum is a recyclable material. It's high energy intense, but it's also very durable. So we use aluminum, and it comes from the global market. So you talk to your supplier, and the supplier will say, well, listen, man, I buy it off the global market, so what am I supposed to do? And then all of a sudden you have a price increase of a couple %, and it doesn't sound like a lot, but then you have on the client side a large supermarket chain, a very large supermarket chain, whose name I won't say out loud here, but you can imagine that their buying center is extremely strong. And then when it comes to the comparison of your products and other products, they will obviously opt for the cheaper product if they are comparable in terms of quality. So it's super difficult to compensate that and to actually enforce that onto your suppliers.
All right. And Constantin, that you mentioned aluminum, that's a super good transition to you, Marco, because aluminum is also playing an important role in the caps of Nespresso. How do you handle that in terms of circularity?
Circularity is, of course, as well key in our processes, and we believe strongly that we should not throw away resources. And when it comes to aluminum, it's of course something where we look at the capsule as an aroma safe, let's say. The work we put in, let's say in coffee growing and all the steps towards the customer, basically we put this whole energy into the capsule and want to protect this, of course, as much as possible. And basically when it comes to a portion system like Nespresso, when we compare it to filter coffee or to automatic systems, for example, full automat, then compared to filter, it ranks equally on the environmental impact, a cup of coffee. And basically, when it comes to full automat, it's even better. Well, the Nespresso solution or a portion coffee is even better due to the less coffee used. So it's a precise system, just using the energy and the coffee which is required for a cup of coffee. And that is, of course, something where, of course, we don't stand still. We've invested in the last year heavily in innovative solutions. The caps are made of 80% recycled aluminium. And we're working together with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and there was the Circulytics rating, and we want to achieve the A rating in 2025, which is really giving the full transparency, not only on the capsule, but of course as well on machines. So looking at refurbished machines, how can we really do this in a circular way? And of course, Circulytics rating as well looks at regenerative agriculture then as a whole, let's say, circular business model.
All right. Development, Daniela, is also a very important topic for your professional background. What's the situation concerning your work that you're doing also at the DLR concerning the development of hydrogen technologies?
Okay, we are supporting the development in many different areas. We have very deep experiences coming from the space industry, because there hydrogen had been used as energy carrier since many, many decades. And we have a lot of requests for support topics, and of course there we are one of the perfect partners, because we are a research institute, a non-profit organization, and we are dedicated to support industry, small and big companies in each development they are aiming at. And hydrogen is a very challenging medium, and therefore we are, as already mentioned, supporting in some different fields. For example, the mobility sector, the aircraft sector as well, especially the aircraft sector, because the challenges in the aircraft sector are extreme. You have the you have to have systems, hydrogen systems, which are really, really safe, of course, because you need to secure the passengers. You have a long lifetime of airplane, and I think in this area the requirements for such a hydrogen system is even more than in the space sector. And they are one of our actual biggest partners, I would say. And our aim is to support in each sector, because hydrogen is of course one media which is a key enabler for circular economies. You can use it in very different areas, in very different sectors. It's a media for sector coupling as well. And we also support not only from the point of conceptual and engineering point, but we are also erecting test infrastructure, because DLR is a big research institute or research institution with many big test infrastructures, and especially from the space sector, we already have possibilities to support in terms of testing, because this is often a thing which is very uneasy for companies if they want to have a product, for example, a new valve, a compressor, a heat exchanger, I don't know, a tank. They don't have the possibility to test, and therefore we are currently erecting several test fields, technology open test fields, where we, with the knowledge from the space sector, we are supporting there and testing their products.
All right, so what I was also wondering, where do you see the biggest advantages right now of hydrogen?
Of course, hydrogen is, if it's produced with regenerative energies, it's a CO2 neutral energy source. It can be a CO2 neutral energy source. And it has no emissions, because it has only hydrogen as chemical element, and water is the reaction the reaction media which is coming out at the end after use. And it has also advantages in terms of safety. This is a very interesting thing because most people are not aware of that hydrogen is not that explosive as it's in the minds of the people. It's very lightweight. It has a very high diffusivity. So if there is a leakage, it normally is away. Or if it burns, then it burns quickly away. It has a big advantage compared to gasoline systems, for example, even compared to methane systems because of the lightweight. There exist many experiments which confirm this, and we from Institute of Space Propulsion, we are handling with many different explosive media since many decades, and we have no issues with hydrogen. We have it more with other media, for example with methane or oxygen is also a very, very bad medium. But hydrogen is a thing which from the point of safety is good to handle.
All right, thank you. So now that you've heard so many advantages, Fabian, I'm wondering why you at MAN are not working towards hydrogen technologies.
Yeah, this is not black and white, so I have to stress that. So, but it's right. We are focusing a lot on the battery electric technology, and that's for our thinking for good reasons. So number one, for economical reasons, our customers, the transport operators, they are normally running on very, very low profit margins, 0 to 1%, you could say. And in our estimates, until 2030, 2032, the price per kilometer for a hydrogen truck compared to a battery electric truck is 2 to 3 times. So that means every kilometer you drive, you pay 2 or 3 times the amount that you would pay for the same battery electric truck. So that's not competitive. But that's only the economical view. And you also have to have the ecological view. And the ecological view is, as long as the electricity grid mix in the EU is very much fossil-based, and that will be the case for some years, we don't see in Europe produced hydrogen to become competitive also from a well-to-wheel perspective in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. So I agree, if you have green hydrogen, it's clean, but if you don't have it, you need very, very clean renewable energy, and that's not there yet. In our estimates, it's even worse than diesel if you do it until 2030, 2032, produced in Europe. So there is some disadvantages. It's not going to be a mass product for us then, but we'll see. Time will tell.
That's true, yeah.
And Johanna, may I also ask you if this is a topic at AUDI?
Well, it's Fabian and I actually just were discussing this before the panel because it's a typical question that we will get because why you're focusing on the electrification. But it's very similar to what Fabian is saying. So from an Audi passenger vehicle perspective, the electrification that we've committed to today is the best way to actually come into this carbon neutral, work towards this carbon neutral path. But hopefully, green hydrogen will become available and will be competitive. But I think in other industries, like you explained in the aircraft, it's probably the use case their priority first. So that's why we are really focusing on the electrification path.
All right.
I'd like to hear that.
And what you're also focusing on, coming back to circularity, is your material loop project. Can you tell us more about that and also the lessons learned of it?
Yeah, so totally different topic, but same context, I guess. So here at the GreenTech Festival, if you're interested, it's also showcased at our Audi booth. We're presenting the Material Loop project we started last year with 15 different partners from supply chains, but also recycling industries. And the goal was basically to find out We used 100 Audi vehicles which had come to their end of life. Which material streams and which processes, so technologically looking, but also from an economic and environmental perspective, which streams can we, as an automotive industry, actually put back into our own material loops? So really focusing on this post-consumer automotive material. And the first lessons learned are motivating, let's say, especially when we look to steel and aluminum, which are really important materials for our vehicles. And also we've derived some lessons learned. We've amended some guidelines regards polymers on how to be more eco-friendly in the design phase. But also we've taken lessons learned from it. So how can we change some of the design processes internally to make it even better recycling at the end? And also, how do we have to set up these partnerships to actually make these loops work? Because it sounds so easy to just circle materials around, but it's of course a very complex process, and you need a lot of partners to do it. But yeah, it'd be great if you want to come and visit the project. I think we can share some more details there and also take some questions, because the experts are at the booth, but it's a very promising project, and I think it's something that we need to work more towards to really come into mindset simply, really, of understanding used materials as new materials, if you will.
All right, all right. Thank you so much. Yeah, time is running, and we are already in our last 10 minutes, so that we also have time for your questions. We are already in the final round of questions. And so I was wondering, maybe, Constantin, you want to start. What is like the most empowering aspect for you on this whole topic on, let's call it sustainability within a company, within an ambitious startup?
Yeah, that has changed a lot throughout my entrepreneurial career. So in my past life, I had a company and we sold household electronics over the internet. So I guess in order to make up for my bad karma, at some point I had to do something about it and start to venture in solar energy 16 years ago. So it's 16 years ago, I built the first solar power plant, and ever since I've been in love with this idea of an ideal world, or an idealized world. It's very difficult to get there, but an ideal world where we don't take raw materials out of the earth anymore. So we recycle everything we use. So it's like a cradle-to-cradle thought, and every joule of energy we use is from renewable sources. And that is a world that I find extremely appealing, and it satisfies me also from an aesthetical viewpoint that it is generally possible to achieve that goal, hopefully during our lifetime, hopefully in my 3 kids' lifetime. But this is definitely the most the most appealing thing in my job, that I can work on this transition, which is the biggest in 100 years.
Wow, this sounds very fulfilling.
It is. Thank you.
Cool. Malcolm, what do you think? Why is it important for companies, no matter if they're small or big, to take responsibility concerning supply chain, net zero emission, and circularity?
Yeah, in our case, for example, to save our coffee. That's, of course, something that saves the coffee for all. That's sure. But I think as well to save ourselves and do quickly turn to the right path to net zero. For Nespresso, for example, that means 2035 at the earliest. So trying to accelerate this really. And I think it's most powerful as well in collaborations to do this. So opening up and be really transparent to this. So really trying to get partners into the supply chain, like collaborations, what we have, for example, with OpenSC, where we have a digital solution really tracking down to the farmer. So you can have, with the blockchain technology, really seeing where your coffee is coming from which farm, and not only that, of course, then having the social impact. I mean, we didn't talk about this today, but this is, of course, something, paying the premiums as well to the farmers, and that every partner in the supply chain has the right, let's say, part or share of this. And I think collaborations are so important in this, to drive this and to make this positive impact. And I think companies, especially bigger companies, have a clear responsibility here, not to save the planet, but basically save ourselves. Huh? That's something.
Yeah. And Fabian, what do you think? Why is it important for you to be responsible as a big company as like MAN?
I think it's just the right thing to do. We have a huge responsibility, and we have to live up to that responsibility. I mean, our depth of value added is around 20%. The rest comes from suppliers and partners, and we will only make it together. There's no way that we will produce electric trucks if there is no infrastructure, or if there is no energy transition. If there's no renewable energy, this will not work. So it's key. It's a key success factor to actually work together successfully, and that's what we're trying to do.
Thank you. Daniela, you're also collaborating successfully with so many business partners, as you just mentioned. Why does responsibility concerning environmental topics is an important topic for you?
I think for DLR in total, the responsibility is one of the big factor, because we are dedicated to be responsible in our work for environmental research fields, for supporting industry as well. We have, for example, in DLR, a big research field, not only for spacecraft and aircrafts. We are also doing a lot of research in terms of energy and mobility technologies, and so this is, I think, it has always been one of the of inherited issues for DLR to make responsible work.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Johanna, it's up to you. You as an absolute supply chain expert, what empowering words maybe can you also say to our audience? Why is it important? Or maybe is there a little trick that you have to convince your partners to be as sustainable as they can?
I hope there are many tricks and not just the one. No, I think, sustainability has been, throughout my entire professional career, has always been like the theme. So maybe this has helped my karma. I don't know. We'll see in the next lifetime, probably. But working within Audi and within the procurement, you're so at the heart of the business, because there are so many partners, and a lot of the value that we create actually happens with the supply chain partners, and they know this. So this is a huge leverage. And I think what I'm starting to understand is, when you work in sustainability, I think it's really about helping the company and the management and the decisions to always push the boundaries a little further. So always find a good balance between what is ambitious enough but still doable, and then you push a little further. So I think this is really what you have to keep doing, and this can be really exhausting sometimes and frustrating. I think that's also part of the story, but of course it's really motivating, because you have a very clear purpose at the end. So I think it's really to keep pushing the boundaries always a little more.
All right, thank you so much. So now the last minutes are yours, and we are happy to answer your questions. Are there any questions? No, no questions. Are you sure? Actually, yeah.
It's gotten too big. Everyone's timid.
Yeah, we have like 1 more minute. So if there are no questions, that's absolutely no problem, because our speakers, they will also be here around the festival. So if you're looking for the direct conversation, this is also possible. So for now, I am very grateful to be part of this talk. And thank you so much for your thoughts, your insights, and thank you so much for listening.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.